Well, my name is Councillor Matthew Lynch, and I am the chair of this committee. I'll now ask all parties in the hearing to introduce themselves. Can I ask the members to introduce themselves first? And the licensing officer?
Yes, good evening. My name is Nathan Howson. I'm the licensing team leader for Chorley Council.
Democratic Services officers are on my left. Would the premises licence holder like to introduce themselves? And the representative? If you just hit the left-hand button.
Well, you'll hopefully be able to hear me. My name's Ewan McGregor.
And on my right, we have Chorley Council's legal officer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tasneem Safdar. I'm the legal services team leader for Chorley and South Road Borough Council. Thank you.
The DPS for the premises.
John Russell.
And other persons. Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. The web address for this is displayed on the agenda for the meeting and can be found on the council's website. To facilitate this, can I request that when you are speaking, use the microphone in front of you, which can be activated by pressing the button on the right-hand side. Once you are finished speaking, please ensure that this is turned off. Just before we start the meeting, there is some housekeeping. We are not due to have a fire alarm. So if you do hear the fire alarm, please can you leave by the nearest exit, which is out the door on the right-hand side, and gather on the courtyard in between the town hall and the police station. And I also ask everybody within the meeting to turn off their mobile phones. The hearing will proceed as follows. The committee will first decide whether to allow persons specified on Regulation 8 notice permission to speak. Then our licensing officer will outline the application and any relevant representations. Questions to the licensing officer will be permitted from committee members, the premises licence holder, and then other persons. The premises licence holder will then be invited to put forward any information in support of their application. Again, questions to the licence holder will be permitted from committee members and then other persons. At this point, the committee will hear representations from other persons, which I'll now refer to as Mrs. Peet. Questions to Mrs. Peet will be permitted from committee members and then the premises licence holder. Finally, Mrs. Peet will be invited to sum up, followed by the premises licence holder. The public and any other persons, officers who are not directly supporting the committee will then be excluded from the meeting at this point as we enter deliberations. The YouTube stream will end. Following deliberations, we will request that the licence holder re-enter the meeting so that I can deliver our decision. The licence holder and other persons will be issued with a detailed notice of decision within 5 working days after this hearing. Now, enter the meeting. Apologies.
No apologies, Chair.
Item 1, declarations of interest. If a member has a pecuniary interest, they must withdraw from the meeting. Normally, you should leave the room before the business starts to be discussed. You do, however, have the same right to speak as a member of public and may remain in the room to enable you to exercise that right and then leave immediately. In either case, you must not seek to improperly influence a decision on the matter. Does any of the members have any interest to declare? Item 2, procedure. The procedure for the meeting has already been outlined. However, a copy of this procedure can be found on page 3 of the agenda. Item 3, determination of application to vary a premises licence for the Lord Nelson, Outlane, Croston. The committee first need to consider whether to allow persons specified on the Regulation 8 notice permission to speak. Nathan, have there been any requests?
Yes, Chair, there was two people who have already introduced themselves to the committee, actually, Nicola Jacks and John Russell. Can't think of any reason not to allow them permission to speak, so I'd recommend allowing them to speak. Thanks, Chair.
Members, permission should not be unduly withheld, so therefore can I have a proposer to allow Ms Peet to speak? And a seconder? All in favour? Thank you. Therefore, excuse me. Therefore, we go to Nathan to outline the case before us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to start on agenda page 5, so if members want to follow along where we are, and I'll guide you through the report. The reason this hearing has been convened is to advise members that an application to vary the premises licence has been made, and that relevant representations have been received regarding that application. Further to this, it's to request that members determine the application in accordance with the provisions of the Licensing Act 2003. I'm going to move straight to paragraph 8 of the report, which is on page 6 of the agenda. This premises has been licensed since its conversion from a justice's license. That was back in 2005. The original premises license did lapse, actually, following the death of the premises license holder in 2012, and a further premises license was granted following this. It's been transferred and varied a number of times since then, until its most recent iteration of the license being granted in 2015. And there's a copy of that existing license, which is appended to Appendix 1. The premises itself is surrounded on most sides by residential properties in close proximity on all sides. To the southwest is another licensed premises. This premises has substantial beer garden to the front and a large car park to the rear. And there's a site plan of this premises, which is appended at Appendix 2. In that site plan, it shows that there's the beer garden, which is shaded in a green colour, and the car park in yellow. Since the reopening following COVID restrictions, the council has received a number of complaints regarding noise at the premises. These complaints relate to the use of the beer garden on Sunday afternoons for live music. A number of joint visits between police, environmental health and licensing were carried out as a result of these complaints, which ultimately resulted in the application to be determined today. On the 22nd of July, an application was received to vary the premises licence, and there's a copy of that application in Appendix 3. The application was advertised in accordance with the regulations, and this application seeks to vary the operating schedule of the premises licence, namely by removing 2 conditions and adding 2 conditions. The first condition to be removed is noise from the premises shall not exceed ambient background noise at the boundary. The second, where noise from the premises exceeds ambient background noise at the boundary of the premises, steps shall be taken to reduce the volume accordingly. The premises licence holder is proposing to impose conditions alternative to that. Any entertainment held within the external area of the premises shall only take place between the months of April and September inclusive, and shall cease at 9 p.m. on any day. Further to this, any event held within the external area shall be documented by a risk assessment regarding preventing any noise disturbance to any nearby properties. Such risk assessment shall be held at the premises for not less than 6 months and shall be produced to a responsible authority on request. On the 30th of July 2021, a representation was received from Mrs. Anne Peet of 51 Town Road, Croston, and there's a copy of that representation appended in Appendix 4. And this representation relates to the prevention of public nuisance objective. I'll move straight to the conclusions, Chair. In paragraph 18, the decision should be based on the individual merits of the application and the representations. In accordance with the regulations, a decision should be made or must be made within 5 working days following the hearing. In accordance with Section 35, the authority must have regard to the representations made and must take such steps as mentioned below as considered appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Those steps that it may take include granting the variation in the manner it's been applied for. It includes modifying the conditions of the license, or reject or refuse to grant the whole or part of the variation. And for the purpose of the preceding paragraph, conditions are modified if any of them are altered or any new condition is added. That's the report, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Obviously, there have been some complaints, and there have been some visits. On the visits that have occurred, has any sound monitoring been undertaken to understand the levels?
Yeah. So the process for it, generally when noise monitoring happens, the process is that a noise complaint is made to environmental health. Some information is sent out about how a noise complaint progresses, and then following that, diary sheets are sent out, and on the back of those diary sheets, then noise recording equipment can be sent out. From what I understand of the noise complaints, there has been information sent out. However, those diary sheets haven't been returned, so there's been no basis to install the noise recording equipment so far, I should say.
So have we got any evidence of sound levels?
Not about sound levels, Chair, other than the complaints which had been received, so the verbal or written complaints.
Thank you. Just looking, obviously, in the report, it refers to the fact, just bear with me a second. It refers to the proximity of properties close to the premises. Now, I have just put up a picture of Google Maps with Lord Nelson on. There is quite a lot of green space there. I do appreciate that the according to Google Maps, number 42 Rectory Close is directly adjacent. How many properties are within 50 yards of the beer garden, shall we say?
Very difficult to say, to be honest, I'm not sure of the scale of the map on agenda page 17, but you can see that they are, in relatively close proximity on all sides. If you were to compare, if you were to walk out the front door of the Lord Nelson into the front door of the Wheatsheaf, for example, you would walk down Out Lane and sort of across the frontage of the two properties, 31 and 29. That would be a walk of a minute and a half, if that. So it is quite a small area.
Just for everybody's information, I've just asked the officers to get a screen grab of what I'm looking at and send it to the members. I think it gives a good indication, in fact, a better indication. Right, excellent. It gives a better indication than I think the highlighted areas. It gives a more realistic view. So hopefully it will pop up in a second. Always good to challenge officers. a satellite view. There you go. That'll do. I think that gives an aerial view.
Through you, Chair, whilst the officer's obviously doing that, can I just confirm, just for the purpose of the committee, that nobody had any objections in obviously having this document uploaded? I know it's got a little Google aerial image, but I think it actually be beneficial for the purposes of the committee hearing. Is that okay? Thank you. Just for confirmation. Thank you.
You got it? There we go. So, if I'm right, if you compare that to the map that you've got, members, I think you can understand. Just to zoom out slightly, just so we can see the properties that surround it. And if you hover over the mouse over the area of the beer garden, that might be beneficial. So that's the car park, and then the beer garden is to the right and down, is it not?
Chair, the orientation there is exactly the same as on the so where the mouse is now is exactly where the beer garden is, right. And you've got the sort of to the rear is where your car park area is. So
from that you can see the location to the properties, which I think is a little bit easier to understand than the map. Any further questions now that you've seen that? No?
Chair, could I ask that I'm looking now at page 20, the proposed variation. It will take place between the months of April and September. Have we any information?
This is the question to the licensing officer.
Sorry, I do apologise.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Sorry. Have we any information regarding the frequency of
the noise events? Yeah. Up until the time being, that they have been every Sunday afternoon. I don't know whether that's proposed to change, but perhaps the licence holder will give you a better idea of that.
Thank you.
And just a final question, Nathan. In terms of noise, how does the licensing team view when noise is inappropriate and when it's appropriate?
Not an easy question to answer, if I'm honest, Chair. There is a distinction between statutory nuisance and a public nuisance. In terms of the Licensing Act, a public nuisance is in essence a noise or a nuisance which is at such a level or such a frequency and at such a duration that any reasonable person would find it to be unreasonable. That's sort of the test for it to become a nuisance. Or a person shouldn't. By that I mean is a person wouldn't reasonably be or a person experiencing such a nuisance wouldn't find it acceptable to put up with that. It's a very subjective question, really.
Holder, any questions? Mrs. Peet, any questions to the licensing officer? Then can I ask the premises holder to put forward information to support their application?
I'm on. Good evening, sir. One of the benefits of having in-person meetings is that I'd hoped to visit the pub before I came here. But due to the vagaries of the M6, I was not able to get anywhere near the pub. And just very quickly, I hadn't appreciated that Lindsay Hoyle was your local MP and that you're hosting the G7 Summit for Speakers this weekend, which is pretty much more attractive to everybody than me sitting before you. And the only other thing I know about Chorley is my cricket club played Chorley in a national knockout final at Lord's, and Chorley won. And that was many, many years ago. So I know very little about Chorley, so the important thing is not that I know a lot about it, but that you know about it and you understand what the local community and what the pubs require. I'm instructed by Punch Taverns Limited. John Russell is the DPS, and Nicola Cruikshank's partner is the leaseholder at the pub, and that's why they are, John and Nicola are here today. There was a meeting in July between the pub and Nathan to discuss the issues that have been raised. And following that meeting, the area manager sent an email to Nathan with some proposed wording to tighten up the condition that we're talking about today. And Nathan came back and said that he was content with the wording, but that he wanted an amendment put onto the condition. And so that was accepted, and we've submitted the application as a consequence of that meeting. And Mrs. Peet has clearly made a representation of the application, which is perfectly entitled to do, and that's why we find ourselves here. At the moment, the pub is permitted to provide live music indoors and out, and recorded music indoors and out, and you'll find this on page 9 of the agenda, from midday until midnight every day of the week. And that's in the bottom sort of third of the page, the Times license authorised the carrying out of licensable activities. And so what the proposal is that the entertainment would only be held between April and September, so that's reducing it by 6 months, and also that the terminal hour would be at the very latest 9 o'clock. It may well be earlier, but just to give the public a bit of flexibility, an hour of 9 o'clock was felt appropriate so far as Punch is concerned. We consulted with your officer, and then we've submitted the application. It is a community pub. It sits in the heart of the community, and you've seen from the Google image that you've got up there that there are a number of chimney pots nearby, and it's important for the pub that they get on with their neighbours and that they do not upset them in any way, and that they provide a good facility within the pub. And it's perhaps telling that, notwithstanding the fact there are a lot of local residents live nearby, that only one of them has made a representation. That's not to belittle Mrs. Peet's contribution. The question, and I'll answer this question for Councillor Sherwood. She's asked how often the entertainment is provided. It is, I think it's been provided quite regularly since the pubs were allowed to reopen. It may be provided on every Sundays. It may be provided on intermittent Sundays. The difficulty with the British weather is that you might book a band to play outside and then the weather says that you can't. So it is intermittent, but the important thing for the pub is that it's crucial for them in relation to how they're able to function and whether or not the pub remains a viable business. So it's a small but important part of what they do. In terms of the entertainment that is provided, it is invariably a singer with a piano, a singer with a guitar, or possibly a duo. So I think there's one event a year where there might be a band, but generally it's limited to one or two entertainers. And they are positioned. Is it possible to get that Google image back up again? It's quite helpful, actually. So if you see where the I'm seeing it as an orange dot that says the Lord Nelson on there. That's about where the entertainer will set up, maybe a little bit to your right. You're probably too young to remember the Golden Shot, but if you'd move the arrow just a little bit to the right of it's about there, I think, having spoken to Nicola and John. That's where the entertainer sets up. And then you've got the tables and chairs in front of it. And then around the periphery of the pub, thank you, there is, it's about there. And could you just zoom out again? There are some trees that go around the edge of the boundary there, and then there is a fence that covers the perimeter of the building. And the intention is that when entertainment is provided, is that there would be a risk assessment, and that the DPS or their manager would carry out assessments of where the noise, and that would be carried out at the edge of or the perimeter of the pub premises, and also at the corner of the road down at the bottom. Is it Out Lane and Town Road? The junction. Do we all know where that is? Which is down there. And so the conditions that have been offered tighten up not only the times of year that the entertainment can be provided, but also the hours that it can be provided. And you still have the requirement for it to be risk assessed, and the noise in the premises is not too, the condition remains that the licence holder will conduct an assessment of noise in the boundary of the premises whilst regulated entertainment is taking place. And those assessments will continue to take place. So it's a much tighter condition. It protects the local residents, and it also enables the pub to continue carrying on with a viable business. I just want to make one comment about the representation from Mrs. Peet, in which she says that she it says we, the residents of 41 to 53 Town Road. I'm not going to make a huge point about it, but just for the record, it's incorrect to say that she's representing all of those residents, because certainly the residents of 47 and 41 do not support the representation that has been made, and the resident at number 47 has provided John with a letter. I'm not going to read it out unless you want me to, but he has, in very short term, says that he has no concerns with the way that the premises operate, and he lives closer to the pub than Mrs. Peet. So that's all I've got to say.
Questions from members? None. Mrs. Peet, would you like to ask any questions? No? Therefore, I will move on and ask Mrs. Peet to make her representations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd just like to say before we start, one or two council members will know my face. I am actually chairman of Croston Parish Council, but I will just state I am not here tonight as a parish councillor. This is not a matter for the parish council. I am here purely as a resident who lives at number 51 Town Road in Croston. I'd also like to comment very sadly that in the last few days I have received harassing messages and a phone call from the lady who's also a resident at the Lord Nelson, making certain accusations. That's not for this meeting, but it's rather upsetting. As Lister pointed out, the gentleman, John, has since told me he didn't wish to be represented in our other group, but other than that, the other residents, as listed on my representation, have confirmed yesterday that they are in accordance with what we wrote in originally as I won't like to call it an objection, just a comment on where how it affects us as residents on Town Road. I've actually lived in our present house for 38 years. My husband's lived in it for 65 years. Other residents in our row have lived in their houses up to 25 years. And we have always had a good rapport with all the local pubs. We are surrounded in lots of directions. There's 3 pubs actually within earshot of our houses. The actual disturbance on a Sunday did actually start back in 2017. When we started having problems. The Google map was actually very interesting because the land to the right-hand side of the boundary of Google Maps, they are actually all the gardens of our properties. Some of the gardens are not directly outside to the back of the property. They're actually shared garden spaces in that area, which historically was an orchard to the farm that actually used to belong to the Lord Nelson. Way back in 2017, there was contact with the police and council complaining about noise, and some work was done and things eased a little bit. I know that in 2018, residents on Rectory Close, which is actually the nearest, probably the actual physical house to the pub, complained and contacted the council and did work with the environmental health and licensing officers at the time. And I think they subsequently met with the landlord and there was a promise of quieter music. Lockdown came along, as we all know, sadly, and when the pub reopened, like a lot of other pubs, they've put a marquee on front where the area isn't shown on the Google Maps, but there is a large marquee now sitting on the front. And at times that's when the music comes from. The music is every Sunday, and when it first started up after lockdown, it was very loud, to the extent that my house is one of probably the furthest away, but even with my back door shut, we could hear the sound of the music. And I appreciate what the pub are trying to do. I know they're trying to attract customers, and we don't want the pub to close or anything like that, but we just ask for a little bit of consideration. It has been noticeable that since the application went in the Chorley Guardian to amend the licence, which is where I saw it, the music has been a lot quieter. It is not noticeable. It is quite livable with at the moment. For the last 6 weeks, it has been. We have been aware that there's been music on, but it's not interfered with us being in the gardens, enjoying our outdoor spaces, or enjoying in our homes with back doors and things open. And if that was to continue, it wouldn't be a problem. Where we do have the problem is when it was louder than that and when it was interfering. Some of the families on our road have young children, and I appreciate the finishing at 9 o'clock, but 9 o'clock on a Sunday night when your children are going to school the next day, they need to be in bed and trying to get sleep, and having to close the windows when the weather is warm is not good. We'd just like to come to some kind of a resolution. We don't want to fall out over it. We don't want to cause angst, but we just want things to be a little bit quieter. You know, we appreciate that there's going to be coffee day, there's going to be New Year's Eve, everybody celebrates, there is a lot of noise. If it was once a month a little bit louder, that wouldn't be so bad. It's the fact that it has been every Sunday through the summer months. And the fact that there is now a marquee on the front, if that marquee remains, we had concerns that this music would continue through the winter because there is a covered facility to facilitate the music. That's all we're asking for. Thank you.
To you, Chair, can I just...
Well, we'll stick to the procedure, and if you want to ask a question at the
It's
end.
not a question, sir. It's just in terms of comments that were made on
Right,
Miss
go on then.
Peet. It's just in terms of the comment that Mrs. Peet made about the residents making the comments. Obviously, it's just Mrs. Peet here as an individual that's making that representation. We can't take into account that other residents, comments. Obviously, if they had, they could have obviously made the representation themselves. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Members, any questions to Mrs. Peet? Mrs. Peet, obviously, you do live within proximity of the Lord Nelson. When you refer to this noise disturbance, how loud does it get?
Very loud at times. Our garden sort of ends where the Lord Nelson finishes on that map. Then there are other gardens. The actual numbers are 49, 47 going up there. And we cannot sit outside and hold a conversation. We couldn't when it was loud. As I say, in the last 6 weeks, it has been much, much better, and we can hear. It's fine. But it had been so loud, and then we'd come into the house, shut the kitchen door, the back door. You could still hear it in the kitchen. You know, at those times, we considered that was too much. It got such that our little group, we have a little courtyard group because we all park around the back. The land has been split to give us all parking. And it's got the fact that, you know, right, where are we going out today so we don't have to, you know, annoy that. And since lockdown, gardens have become so important to people and outside spaces. And I can understand why people going to the Nelson want to be outside, because it is the safest place to be, and that's quite natural. We just ask that, you know, it just turn down a little bit.
Obviously, we've seen a picture, an aerial view. How far would you say your property is from Lord Nelson? I'm just after the rough distance, and I can see your property here. So is it, what is it, 20 metres, 30 metres, 100 metres?
From where I'm sitting here now, I have mine's the longest garden. My garden will end where that building starts, over there, the police station.
So from your actual property?
Yeah. The property's on the front of Town Road,
Yeah.
but the gardens all go a long way back.
Right. So from your actual house, how long would you say it is? 50 metres, 60 metres?
You're asking somebody that's not very good at measurements. Looking where you are now, you've just put the pointer now on my house, that's me. And then our garden goes all the way back. Where there's a red, you can see some red there. Right, that's our car. That's parked at the top of our garden. And then the next bit on is next door neighbour's garden, and the next two bits as well. So they're all gardens. And the very end bit, which is alongside the back of the Lord Nelson, the car park and the bit, that's the garden to the barn, which is in front of me.
So you've referred to a couple of things. One is the marquee. So I'm just going to clarify something with the licence holder. Is the marquee in place to enable COVID restrictions to be in place?
It was, and it's in the process of being taken down.
Does that explain, is that a reasonable explanation as to why the marquee is in place? Excellent. So I think we're making a little bit of progress already. As for the noise, obviously your concern is the noise. It's not what type of noise. It's not what type of music. It's not, you know, things like that. It's just the noise levels.
Yes, it's just the noise level. I'm very fond of music. I'm not anti-music at all.
And that is purely from the music generated, not any spill out of customers or any antisocial behaviour or anything like that.
No, we've no experience of any antisocial behaviour.
Right. So other than the music that's playing, you're quite happy with how the premises is run. You're quite happy with how it's managed, and you're quite happy with the clientele that visit there.
Yes, we're quite happy.
Excellent. Right. Any further questions from that? Okay, would the licence holder like to ask Mrs. Peet any questions? Thank you. Therefore, can I ask Mrs. Peet, will you like to sum up why you don't think the conditions are a positive step?
Just to reiterate, our concern is that to take off the clause about ambient noise could lead to the noise levels being allowed to be above what we as neighbours would consider to be acceptable. We are not against the music by any short. We're quite happy with what goes on there and everything else, but we just ask to be allowed at least some Sundays when we can sit out without having to shout, and we can have visitors around. That's all we're asking. We are in a very close-knit community, and we'd like to work together to make it work for everybody, for all parties. And as I have already said, the last few weeks it has been noticeably quieter, and it has been quite acceptable.
Thank you. And the the premises licence holder, would you like to sum up?
I'll be very quick, Councillor. It's interesting that when you have these meetings between officers and pub and residents, if they're there, is that it's sometimes a catalyst for change. Whilst we've probably all got better things to be doing on a Thursday night, this will hopefully resolve a lot of the issues that there have been. And when Mrs. Peet says it's been noticeably quieter and quite acceptable, that's no surprise, because since we've had the meeting, there's been a change in the way that the business is operating. That can only be a good thing. Now, your experienced councillors, your experienced committee, and what you've got to try and do is balance the need of the pub, the need of the community, and the comments that have been made by the one resident who's made an objection to the application. The application arises out of discussions that we've had with your officers. There are no regulatory concerns. There are no representations from any of the responsible authorities. And so you, I think, put your finger on it fairly early on, is that you ask questions about diary sheets for noise records. There aren't any diary sheets for noise records. There's no basis on which to install a limiter, and I think your line was there's no evidence. And you look at these matters on the basis of evidence. I'm not listing what Mrs. Peet says, but that's the wider context in which you look at the application. And what has been offered is a much tighter condition, because it's reducing the days of the year and the hours of the day in which the entertainment's got to be provided. And it's been a tough time for pubs. We all know that, and we see that from seeing on the news and just people we know and being about. The provision of entertainment in the pub on a limited basis is critical to the ongoing survival of the pub. We're coming to the end of September. If the weather stays like this, there won't be any entertainment on a Sunday night outside, because the weather's not going to permit it. But there'll be a period of quiet, and then hopefully by the time the summer comes again, the good measures that we've installed since the application has been lodged will continue when the pub is able to provide the entertainment in April next year. But it's a much tighter condition, and actually it protects the residents more fully than the existing condition does, for all the reasons that I've said. I'm beginning to repeat myself, so I'll stop there. So I'll invite you to grant the application.
Right, the public and any other persons or officers who are not directly supporting the committee will be excluded from the meeting at this point as we enter deliberations. The YouTube stream will end. Following deliberations, we will request that the licence holder re-enter the meeting so that I can deliver our decision. Oh, I do apologise. So, yes, can I ask everybody to leave, and we can